Hi there, I'm your host Macaulay Tucker, and you're listening to The Macaulay Tucker Show, the podcast where I sit down with some of the most accomplished and fascinating individuals in the entertainment and business industry. From celebrities to industry leaders, our guests offer unique perspectives and inspiring stories that will educate and inform you. Join me as I sit down with my next guest to cover their humble beginnings, challenges they faced, as well as their accomplishments in life. You are bound to learn something new, so sit back and enjoy the interview. Today in the Macaulay Tucker Show, we had a very special guest, Harrison. You may recognize Harrison from things such as Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Finding Stuff Out, and also playing the character Bowie in Some Assembly Required. Today in the show, we talk to Harrison to learn a bit more about what it's like to be an actor and a creator, so sit back and enjoy the interview. You know, you were born out in British Columbia, and out there, it's very full of art, from what I found. Very full of art, and it's continuing to grow. With art, and it was probably exciting to hear about productions because in this area, productions like Smallville and X-Men were being shot nearby. I'm not sure when and what time, but in that area, a lot of these films are being shot. You know, during this time, you started messing around with the piano. You were growing. Specifically, you kind of started out with the piano and started practicing there. And soon after, in like January of 2008, you kind of like put yourself on YouTube. And this sparked a whole creative journey that you're even on to this day. I recall that you bought like a $20 Walmart camera and were just, making videos. You came up with a fun name for your production, Turn Up Time Entertainment. You had a friend from Norway actually make an intro for that. They animated it, took some time.
God.
And so like you've been doing this for quite a while.
I forgot about that. I forgot about the intro that the guy from Norway.
Yeah, and so you did that, and like you learned the drums, and you just began like growing with this toolbox. Looking back at how did these early experiences with the performing arts influence your decision to kind of pursue acting, and perhaps even the specific types of roles you gravitate towards right now?
Yeah, I think my experience with, wow, you just brought back so many memories of creating that intro when I was like, I don't know, 11 years old. I'm just thinking about that. But yeah, when I was creating stuff, I had moved towns. So I grew up on Vancouver Island. So the art scene is cool and weird on Vancouver Island compared to like Vancouver City. And there was a lot of theater stuff, like you were saying. So I saw a lot of that growing up. And yeah, I had moved town. So I was born in Duncan Hospital. It's a very small town, and then was in Ladysmith. And then I moved to Qualicum Beach when I was like 8 years old. And that was when I got that, a $20 camera. And I think it was like, I have an older sister, so she was in high school, and I think like one of her first boyfriends showed me YouTube. It was like brand new. Like this thing was around for a year at the time. And I was like, oh, that's cool. He made like this video in film class or something. And so I just started making videos because I was already playing piano and I was already messing around with like some music stuff. And then around that time, I was like begging my parents to get a Mac. I'd grown up with computers in my life. I remember just like having computers at a really young age, right, and getting my older sister to teach me computer stuff. So that lended some skills into like music production and video editing, and like getting a Mac was like, I just remember finding that on the internet somehow and being like, oh, I need this. I need to have GarageBand, and I need to have like iMovie, and like then I can do it. Right. And I remember having like Cyberlink Power Director 7 or whatever on my PC, and like I couldn't do, I don't know why, I just didn't figure out any music stuff. But once I eventually got a Mac, partially saved up. I think I like begged my parents for one, and I saved up a lot of money and like ended up pooling it together for a Christmas gift or something. And that kind of sparked a lot of creativity for me. I was also, like I said, I had moved towns, so I didn't have like a lot of like friends, and I didn't have a lot of stuff to do. So I was kind of just like started making videos, and then I made some friends and kind of forced them to be in the videos with me. And then because there was nobody to really tell me how to make stuff, and there was nobody really, there wasn't tutorials on YouTube like there's now for everything. You could like, there's a tutorial for every little thing now on YouTube. I feel like you can get a tutorial on like how to open a door. I feel like, so there was nothing. I was just kind of messing around, and then um, because I didn't have people to put in front of the camera, it often just ended up being me.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess even before that, though, like I was doing performances, like I was a performer.
Hmm.
Like I was doing piano recitals when I was really young. And when I was very, very young with my sister, we would be like, my grandparents would come to visit and we would like put on a show. Like we would, I remember doing like the Pokemon theme song. I remember like doing some Spice Girls, like whatever my sister was listening to, honestly. And we would like put on a routine and like create a dance routine and like perform. Like, because we had nothing, like that was just what we were kids hanging out. So that was like, I guess performance ended up just being a part of my life. And then add a camera to that, I started, and no friends. So I was like in front of the camera. And then I was like, oh, this would be like cool. And, you know, of course, I'm growing up watching all these amazing shows that I still really like to this day, which is like, you know, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, you know, Hannah Montana and Wizards of Waverly Place, and like all these shows. I think I just named like 10 Disney shows, but I watched a ton of Nickelodeon as well, and like YTV growing up. And yeah, all these shows influenced me, and I wanted to do that. I remember hearing a radio ad one day, which was totally not like, it was kind of false advertising, but they were like,
Hmm.
oh, we're looking for actors that could be like the next teen actor on like Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. And like basically they just listed like all the shows that I was watching, and I was like,
Yeah.
I need to do this. And I don't know, I actually don't know how, but my sister was doing some acting stuff like before this. Like I must have been like 6 years old when my sister was auditioning a little bit, but um, she had never gone to like acting school or anything. So she did it for like a year, and then she ended up quitting doing that. She wanted to focus on school stuff.
Hmm.
So I remember going into one audition with her once, just like I was there, and I was like, I want to go. I want to see what my big sister's doing. So it was like an ice cream commercial or something. So I remember that experience. That was very strange looking back because I was very shy, but like was very curious.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, I ended up asking my parents if I could do this once I heard the radio thing, the radio ad. And they're like, okay, we'll look into it. And it's like a acting school that was in the city, which is, you know, it's a 3 hour trip for me to get there. They're like, we'll go audition, we'll check it out. That's where like it's kind of a scam, but not really. They
Hmm.
audition you, but they're not auditioning you for a show. They're auditioning you for a acting program.
Hmm.
But the acting program was not bad. My parents like looked into it, and they're like, the price wasn't like that bad, like for what you're getting if you take advantage of the courses that they're
Yeah.
offering. Compared to what was available on the island, it was a good deal. I
Right.
mean, so they're like, if you want to do this, we're going to do it for 2 years. Like you're going to go to
Okay.
this acting school for 2 years. Do you really want to do it? We'll go over every single weekend, which is, you know, 3 hours each way.
Wow.
I was like, yeah, let's do it. I really want to do it. It looks so much fun. So, and I'd done some drop-in classes and some theater
Yeah.
stuff before that too. So I had done some theater and like acting classes. So it wasn't like the first class I was doing. So that's why they're like, do you really want to like commit to this?
Hmm.
And I was like, yeah, I really want to do this. Um, so yeah, I ended up doing that for like 2 years. It was a really fantastic program. I remember jamming like 6 classes a day on every Sunday.
Wow.
Uh, and it would be like, wait, get up at 7 a.m., get there at 10 or 11, start class. I literally would start class right at 11. I'd be like 10 minutes late sometimes, depending on the bus or like the ferry if it was late. And then I would be in classes till like 7 p.m., rush back to the ferry terminal, get on the last ferry home, be home at like 11 p.m., have school the next day kind of thing. So it was a full day, like
Wow.
every Sunday for 2 years. I don't think I missed any classes. I mean, I'm sure there was a couple weeks, but I did that for 2 years and then got a manager, just kind of fell into, you know, doing the thing, which is like went to school, got a manager, started acting, like started auditioning, and then I booked those first roles that you were talking about. And Diary of a Wimpy Kid was like insane because I was reading those books when I was auditioning for the movies. So
Yes.
I remember auditioning for every role in that movie. Like I auditioned for the lead, I auditioned for Greg, I auditioned for Rowley, I auditioned, and then it was like, hey, audition for these three characters. Canada has this like, now that I'm older, looking back, I'm like, oh, that's maybe one of the big reasons why maybe I didn't book one of those roles. I'm not sure, but I don't know. They have this thing where they don't really cast a lot of Canadian actors for those
Yeah.
bigger parts. So all the smaller parts are available for like Canadians because it's shooting there. So yeah, I ended up auditioning for like these three smaller roles. I remember the casting was really great. Like the
Yeah.
Canadian casting, they just kept bringing me in. They like really wanted me in the movie. They're like, you need to be in this movie. And I was like, yes.
That's
I
awesome.
agree.
Yeah.
So that was kind of that. That's the journey of, and I know it's a little bit of a long answer, but that's the journey of like me getting into film and creativity and like getting into acting and just starting that whole journey. And of course, music was always a part of that too. I was always making music parodies and stuff on YouTube because I played piano and I started playing drums in that time frame. So
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned a lot of great points there. Like specifically when you were talking about how you started, how you really wanted a MacBook. My dad had a MacBook and I would spend a lot of time on GarageBand like you said. Like I don't have any musical experience besides I think 4 years of guitar and that's it and that was years ago. And so it's really cool to hear how that kind of impacted you. And I can totally get behind the idea of Canadian actors not really at the time being put on the forefront. You said you really enjoyed Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, and I'm pretty sure the guy who worked on that show also worked on the show that Some Assembly Required. I'm not sure. Don't quote
yeah,
me on.
yeah. Dan, the show creators, both of them, like Dan
Yeah,
and Howard, were producers on Sweet Life, which is pretty good, and like writers, I'm pretty sure. So
yeah,
it's
and
kind
it's
of
like it's a really cool connection from what you said there to then we'll talk about that later. But yeah, no, it's so true, and it's really cool to see how you continue to grow and practice, you know. And as you kind of continued down this journey in 2010, you combined your love of music to your YouTube channel. You began to do a lot of songs, but also the show that I discovered you from when I was younger was the show Finding Stuff Out, and I could talk a lot about that. I was actually talking with my friend about that today, and he's like that show was so cool. I thought that was like a big, like a real house. I thought that was like, it was so cool. And so one of the questions that came to mind this morning that I wanted to ask you is, you know, since Finding Stuff Out was all about uncovering, you know, like facts, things that we don't really know. Is there one thing you remember learning during the show, something that you found through Finding Stuff Out that you can still recall to like to this day? Like I guess, you know, there might be a bunch of different ones. I wanted to ask you that.
oh my gosh. Finding Stuff Out is a show that I feel like every single episode was there was something that I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was I was for real finding stuff out every episode of Finding Stuff Out, which is brilliant in its own way. So, is there one that sticks out to me? Oh, I wish I prepared for this question.
I feel so bad.
No, no, it's okay. Um, is there one that sticks out to me? I'm trying to rack my brain for every episode. We did so many.
Oh
I think
yeah.
we did like 50 episodes.
And you directed one according like one of them you directed one. I mean, I'm not sure
I
how
did
true.
I segment directed one. I don't know why I did this. I segment directed one of the episodes after I left the show and they had Zoe, the new host.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful. Um, I'm trying to think. I can't think right now.
It's all good. It's
Every
all
episode,
good.
every episode had something like I was talking to experts every single episode, like doctors and scientists and just like experts in their field, like cognitive science. I remember the one episode I went to it was like a cognitive sleep clinic and they like put the electrodes on your head and they like pasted them on and I everything in that show like I pretty much did for real. There might have been some movie magic moments where it's like we just didn't have time. So so they would fake some stuff, but most of it was for real. Like I got to do
Yeah.
a lot of really cool stuff. Um, I remember the hot air balloon episode was insane. Um, we went to the Montreal, or was it? Yeah, the Montreal like hot air balloon festival, which is like one of the biggest hot air balloon festivals in North America, or is the biggest. And something that kind of shocked me. I always talk about this episode because I think going in a hot air balloon is such a weird thing that you don't really think of, and it's kind of a rare experience.
Right.
And I've never thought about this, but once I was in the hot air balloon, and you realize when you're like, you're so high up in the sky, you're hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of feet in the sky, and you're just like in a wicker basket with a like those parachutes in school that you have in the gym,
Yeah.
like basically that, just like floating with hot air, and you're like, what? Like this is so fragile. Like I feel like it's the most fragile thing. And then once I was up in the air, I never thought about this while I was on the ground or before. I was very excited to go in a hot air balloon because I'm not afraid of heights, so I was very excited about that. And then I realized, like, once we were up there and we kind of filmed everything we needed to film, we're just kind of enjoying the moment. And then I was like, how do we land? Like, you can't control the direction you're going. You're going in the direction of the wind.
Right.
So how do you know where you're landing? Because it's not like you make a 180 and come back and land in the field that you took off from. He's like, they have a plan, and this guy's plan was so bizarre to me. It was like, well, if the wind goes this way, we have these two options, and if it ends up shifting, then we have a backup over here. And based on the forecast, that's what we do.
No way.
And then the wind shifts. He's like, okay, we're gonna have to land early. We're gonna go to this field. It's smaller. We'll see. And I'm like, oh my God, this is insane. Like they just pick some random field to land in, and it's like some farm, like somebody else's farmland. Like you're just landing in someone's property. And you don't land perfectly straight down because you're like traveling like, I don't know, 30, 40 kilometers an hour by the time you hit the ground. So the basket hits the ground and you go like full sideways. And I just remember like, he's like, oh, hold on tight, like hold on really tight. Like, and I was like, oh my God, like we're gonna die just like crash landing this thing. And we like barely missed these power lines. And I'm like, I didn't even think about that. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this thing is insane. Like, I don't ever want to get in a hot air balloon again after that. But
That's
awesome
not.
experience. And I'm like, so maybe that's something, an interesting fact that you just don't really think about with hot air
Yeah,
balloons.
that's so true. And that's like a crazy environment. I mean, that's what I've learned with these show, with this show. Like, not only am I asking questions to people like you, but like I'm learning as well, while other people are learning when they listen to it. And so it's like I've been doing this for like 4 or 5 years, and it's like you learn so much, and you sometimes even go back and you're like, wow, I totally forgot that. And you get like a lot of life advice. And so I bet that show was, a great, phenomenal time. After this, as a creator, both on camera and the music studio, at this point in time, 2011, you're fairly skilled in the music. You actually, I think, released an album in 2011 on Bandcamp, and you just began to produce a lot more. After all this time, you were casted as Bowie in YTV and the Netflix original Some Assembly Required. I grew up watching that as well. Looking back, it just embodies everything that I enjoy about a show and just life in general, just being creative and bizarre. And it's so much fun. And this was kind of hard because there could be so many questions that I could ask. And I know you've done a fair share of interviews, and it's always awkward and weird giving the same answer again. So I was trying to figure out what I could ask you, but I had some really interesting questions to ask, specifically the character. He's very eccentric. It's a lot of fun playing that character, I bet. But like, how did you approach, finding the balance between these qualities to make him such a memorable character? Like, did you draw any specific inspirations from like, comedic actors or such? Were you just given the script and say, do this? Like, what were you able to add your
Well,
own like creative spin?
I was playing a lot of very nerdy characters. It was kind of like a thing that I was falling into.
Mhm.
Funny enough, like finding stuff out was like I'm playing myself, but I like when I booked finding stuff out, I gotta go back to finding stuff out to
Yeah.
explain this. So when I booked finding stuff out, I like did not like in school, like science was probably my least favorite subject. So when I booked finding stuff out, was kind of an interesting thing. And I felt a little bit like I was like lying to the audience of being like, this is so interesting, like all this science stuff. But then as the show went on, I actually did get really interested in it. And funny enough, my grades at school kind of flipped. I used to be like, I was getting like, straight A's, 100% in math. And I was like a B student in science. And that flipped after doing Finding Stuff Out, like season 1, season 2.
Wow.
So it's kind of an interesting thing to look at and go, oh, Finding Stuff Out actually like made me more interested in science than math, which is kind of an interesting thing. Or like just more knowledgeable about how that works, which is a very interesting thing. I don't know if that was because of the show, but I have a feeling it was. And then that, I mean, being into science and like talking to like nerds of their fields, like I talked to the biggest nerd of every field possible on that show, like, which also makes my character a little bit nerdy, and I'm like making this kind of nerdy music already. Like I was a piano person and like synths, and like I was already making nerdy stuff. And I had a nerd character on my YouTube channel called Corn Dog Cheese Fingers, who was just like ultimate nerd, like sweater vest. I remember like buying a sweater vest for that character and like dressing up and like, hiking the shorts up and like long socks and just like socks and sandals and like just make my hair greasy or whatever, and just being the nerdiest possible like trope of a nerd. And a lot of people were like, oh, it's very Urkel. And I
Yeah.
didn't know who Urkel was. I never watched that. I've never even seen that. So then I was like looking it up and I was like, oh yeah, it is very much Urkel. So it wasn't inspiration or anything, but it was interesting to see the mirror of that. And then just kind of understanding that that comedy already exists. Um, yeah, like I was always just playing around a lot. And honestly, I didn't watch a lot of movies even.
Right.
I was watching a lot of these kids shows. And so my dream was to be on a kids show, to be on a sitcom, not even knowing what sitcom was versus single cam, really.
Yeah.
Um, and then the audition came along for Bowie. The breakdown was, oh, sorry, I had just done Spooksville.
Yes.
And I did one episode of Spooksville that I booked, which was basically my Corn Dog Cheese Fingers character, but on a show called Spooksville, and his name was Scaredy Katzman, Stanley Katzman, but they called him Scaredy because he was a scaredy cat of everything. Like he was just a huge nerd, scared to talk to girls, scared, like just ultra nerd. And like I got to take that character and basically translate it to a TV show, and the team there loved it. That was such a cool experience. That was my first time in a weird way working with other actors that were like my age, that like I actually like had lines, like speaking, like I actually had conversations with other actors my age. Like that was my first time doing that, because Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I was like, I had one line, so it was kind of separate. And the way the story works is like they're talking about me and it's a flashback.
Yeah.
So I don't really interact with like a lot of other people in that movie. And then Alex for Untold Stories, I was in a hospital bed, like basically dead the whole time. And then Finding Stuff Out, I was acting, but I was acting as myself, and I'm more of a host. And a lot of the guests were adults, like
Yeah.
experts adults. And then the kids were like real game show contestants that we would bring in. So they weren't acting. It wasn't really like a scene like I had done an acting class before, So nothing really was like that until Spooksville. And that's when I was like, oh, I'm actually like acting with other people. And it was so fun having that energy. And like the other actors on the show loved me and my character, and like I feel like we got along really well. And I think the producers and writers saw that, and they loved the character once they saw it. And so that ended up being 2 more episodes. I was only supposed to be one, it ended up being like 3, which was really great to bring that character back. And they wanted to, that Spooksville was supposed to go another season, but the whole network went under. And
Mhm.
then they almost sold it to Netflix. They were talking to Netflix, but this was early days of Netflix, so it just didn't happen. But they were talking about bringing me back as like a regular for season 2, which would have been so cool. That show was so cool. But right during that time when I was doing like second episode or third episode of Spooksville, I was auditioning for Bowie, and the breakdown, and I'll just pull up the breakdown. I have it somewhere. I keep out every email. I'm gonna read you the breakdown of Bowie, which I don't think I've ever done
No
before.
way.
Yeah, audition info. I have the original audition info breakdown of this.
No way.
It's May 6th, 2013. This is
Wow.
this is crazy. Okay. Shout out Marine Webb.
Exclusive, exclusive.
Here's all okay. Here's the Bowie Sherman breakdown. Bowie Sherman is one of Jarvis's best friend, and Jarvis may be Bowie's only friend. Whereas Jarvis is a leap before you look kind of guy. Bowie is more of the look again, then run screaming type. Bowie may not be cold and calculating, but he does like calculating, and he often gets a cold, even though his mother made him take a sweater. Bowie excels at math and science, allowing him to quantify and explain why people don't want to be around him. He wants to use his skills to design and engineer new toys, but unfortunately, his ideas range from bad to dangerous. Bowie may not have Jarvis's creative flair, few people do, but he definitely has a unique worldview. He marches to the beat of his own drum. Well, he actually doesn't have his own drum. He has bagpipes. And we do not want to see him march to those. He's terrible and doesn't have the legs for a kilt.
Oh, wow.
So I saw this breakdown and I was like, this is just one of these characters that I can play. Like, I can play like I love these awkward characters. I love these nerdy characters. They're so much fun. This character breakdown is like, oh, he's unique. He marches to the beat of his own. He marches to the beat of his own drum, and he's just like this unique person that doesn't maybe like follow the rules that everyone else does. So auditioning for this character was like just taking parts of all these other characters I've played and myself, which I'm like already this kind of weird. I'm the only YouTuber in my school, like making these weird YouTube videos and like super weird comedy stuff and the weirdest music crap you've ever heard. Like my music was just so strange. Like when I released that Bandcamp album in 2011, it makes no sense. If I go back and listen to it, it's so quirky and awkward music. Like everything I was doing was just in line with that character. So when I auditioned for it, I remember Marine Webb, the casting director, bringing me back like 2 or 3 times just to like get it right. Cause she was like, you are this character, like you're right for this role. And like, you just need to present it the right way.
Yeah.
And I didn't know sitcom stuff. So I didn't really know what they were looking for. And like, I was like 14. So I wasn't like putting a lot of like study and work into like for stuff. I was just having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, that ended up being a callback and then a chemistry read. And then like I booked the role and like, I don't know if it's like, is it egotistical to be like, I don't think anyone else can play Bowie. No one else can play Bowie the way I played Bowie because half of that character is just me. And like on set, I just embodied that character. It's so fun to me to play that type of character and just, it's just fun to like weird people out.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
People feel awkward or just like, yeah. And the writers saw that and like took it even further, especially in like season 3. I feel like I got to do lots of really fun stuff with the cast that like they like hated me for sure. I'm like very good friends with the cast still.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
They didn't actually hate me, but I'm saying like on set they like hated me because the awkward energy I would bring to scenes. They just were like, oh, like why? Just like why did they write this for you? Like like now we have to do this scene with Harrison being weird and like I'm like, yep.
Looking back, like it must have been so memorable. I would love, I mean, it's not like every person's dream, but it'd be super cool to be in that position. And you've talked about like filming and stuff. And I know you've put an emphasis on how a while back, I mean, this is a while back, you talked about how you don't like a lot of change. And I know for you, you've loved to talk about Vancouver and how, kind of filming and things and whatnot there. but you decided to move to Los Angeles, I believe, in like 2019. So I wanted to kind of hear about, filming like in Los Angeles. Like what were the aspects of Vancouver? Like, was there anything like you're like, oh, I feel like I'm limited to my creativity here? Like, how was that changed? Because it's a big change going from Vancouver to Los Angeles. Like, I'd love to hear
Yeah,
about.
LA's a beast, man. LA is a different place. I I believe in the dream of LA still and what's possible here, and I'm starting to see that more and more recently. But LA is also very chaotic,
Yeah.
and it's a place that I feel like I have to leave sometimes. But no, the thing that's different about Vancouver and LA that I find, this is coming from more of like a director, producer standpoint, is like there is there's very talented people, extremely talented people in Vancouver. So I'm not saying that there's not talented people in Vancouver when I say
Yeah.
this, but LA is just on a different level because I think what LA has that Vancouver doesn't is like 10 times the amount of people, and everybody in LA is like in the business or related to the business of film, it seems.
Mhm.
And when you're in an environment like this, where it's very ultra competitive in Los Angeles, because everybody here is trying to do it,
Yeah.
it kind of creates. I've had this conversation recently where there's a lot of people that, people like talk about how people are fake in LA, and like there's a lot of talk in the industry where it's like, oh, people lie about like or brag, but like
Yeah.
exaggerating their like resume or whatever. But I think that's part necessary sometimes to like
Hmm.
get to where you want, and like faking it till you make it is there is a certain element to that for some people. Some people take it way too far.
Yeah.
I think what that does is you're constantly meeting people and they're telling you about all this really cool stuff they're doing and the people that they're working with and the studio that they're filming at, or like the project that they're making or making next or just finished. And like it kind of puts you in a position where you have to work 10 times harder than you thought you had to, because you're like, I want to be doing that, or I want to be there, or like you have people doing what you want to be doing. So again, it's like ultra competitive. And even if this person is like lying about the level they're at, if you don't know it's a lie or not, it doesn't matter, because you're like, I need to be there and I'm gonna work harder to get there. So it kind of is like this weird self-serving like pressure cooker of an environment where everyone is like really, really, really working to be the best talent they can be.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's not everybody in LA. Some people are like waiting for their thing to just happen. But I'm saying that exists here because of the environment. Whereas Vancouver, there's less people. It seems a lot more chill. A lot of people have work that they're getting paid for through like Vancouver's such a big film town now. When I started, it was just beginning to become like really, really big.
Yeah.
I think they like when I was starting to act like 10, 14 years ago, they had just like solidified as like a film town pretty recently. Like people were
Okay.
like, this is the spot. And now though it's like insane. Now it's like I think there's more productions in Vancouver than like maybe LA. I don't know. Maybe that's not true. Don't quote me on that. But it
Yeah.
seems like it that way sometimes. Like the joke is, oh, you'll go audition in LA and film in Vancouver. Like the project will just bring you back to Canada because of the amount of stuff filming there.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that all the talent is from there, because of the population size of Canada, and the money for projects is all coming from LA.
Oh yeah.
So director, producer, somebody who wants to create stuff, and I want bigger budgets. The people are here that are providing that, and the opportunities exist here, and I truly do still believe that, and like see that like what am I trying to say? Like I believe it, but it's also real. Like I've seen the reality of that, as far as like the availability of funding for your projects in the US and versus Canada. And also on top of all that, there's a lot of indie studios here. There's a lot of like new people like throwing stuff at the wall and are down to make stuff with you.
Hmm.
Not that exists in Vancouver, but not in the same way.
Yeah.
Like I've found a community of filmmakers in Los Angeles just because of the vast amount of people here, far easier like to work with on very, very low or no budget stuff that can make a really, really cool project. And I think that exists here because, like I said, everybody who wants to be doing it is here. So yeah, I think good people attract good people. And um, yeah,
Yeah.
if you're making stuff and you get to like LA or New York or like these huge hubs, then it's like you're in a different ballpark.
Yeah. And I
In
found that with
Vancouver,
journalism too.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
for sure. Because it's like if you're a journalist, I mean, like there's only so much happening in Toronto that you can even cover versus like LA, there's an event every night and it's like the biggest celebrities are here in LA, so they go to the events. Whereas like the Toronto ones, they got to fly people in, so they have like 1/10 of the amount of like
Yeah.
celebrities there to talk to, or like yeah. So it's all relative, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing necessarily. I love Vancouver, and I think there's very, very extremely talented people there, like I said, but they do get stuck. This is the main difference I've noticed. They get stuck in this like service town mentality, and they get used to the paycheck of like Hallmark movies. And like LA seems like there's a way bigger indie, independent film scene that's like people are making people are making art here. That sounds silly.
Yeah.
I hate saying that. People, but it's kind of true. It's like people,
Yeah.
and not that, again, not that people aren't doing that in Canada, but it's just more. There's more here.
Yeah.
Even for kids' content, like Some Assembly Required. Like, is that the last great sitcom coming out of Canada? Like, that is
Yeah.
crazy to me. Like for kids, like where's the original kids content? I mean, it exists. I think
Yeah.
TVO is like the main provider of that, but there's also like YTV is like, what is happening with YTV? What's
I
happening with
know.
Chorus? Like, it's
Sucks.
very concerning. ET's done. I know, like, I mean, all these networks are struggling. I mean, even in the US, these like big streaming services, like Paramount Plus is like struggling apparently. Like, it's like just so
Yeah.
bizarre. And
And
like the
yeah.
space is shifting a lot very recently. So this industry, journalism, entertainment, like film, music, like they're so difficult to do, and because a lot of people want to do it, and there's only like so many spots available and so much
Yeah.
money available from the big companies that have the money to do it. So Canada has a great grant program. It's very limited and they have a lot of
Yeah.
limitations to it. um and they have like that's the thing, it's like Canada has like 5 networks or something, like there's like 5 big companies, whereas like the US is 500. Like
Yeah.
it's just on a different thing. So it's like, oh, if a company shuts down in the US, you don't feel it as hard as if something shuts down in Canada. It's like you lose 20% of your content when if a big company goes under in Canada or like merges, it's like you're losing such a big percentage there, where it's like here, it's like you don't feel it as much.
Absolutely.
And
And
like
kind
new
of
companies are popping up. So yeah, it's a different thing.
yeah, and it's exactly what you said there. It's like, there's so many powerhouses and a lot of it's like in the US. And kind of like on the subject of powerhouse, like like production. I know you've talked about before, you've mentioned, I'm not sure if this has changed. You mentioned a disliking to like pre-production as a producer. And I wanted to kind of hear if you could like elaborate on that. Like what parts of like pre-production do you find the most challenging? Is there like any specific aspects of filmmaking that you enjoy more and why?
Um, Interesting. I have said that I don't like pre-production. But that might be changing a little bit, or maybe
Okay.
I'm learning it a little bit. Maybe I'm learning a better way of doing it, or just building out a team that is more helpful for that. Um, yeah, pre-production is still my least favorite, and I think it's because okay, so I realized I love development, which is before
Yeah.
pre-production. So I love development. Pre-production is like as a producer, I don't know. It feels like a lot of just like putting pieces together and waiting
Yeah.
for the thing to happen, which is like crewing up and scheduling and like figuring out the budget. And I think that stuff is fine. And I do it. And I do it quite well with my team, which is like Dakota and like Vesperia and a few other people we work with. But and we're getting quite good at it now. But on an indie level, I think it's a very different thing when you have like a very, very low budget on a short film versus like millions of dollars on a feature. I think it becomes a little bit easier when you have money because
Yeah.
you're paying people and it's just easier. But I don't know how much easier. And I also think just just having time and doing more projects, that pre-production process has gotten clearer to me of how I like to do it, or like how we like to do it, at least like on the team that I have. But yeah, so that's made it easier and more enjoyable. Like we just finished a production last weekend and it was so easy. Like it just came together. I wasn't stressed about it like I have been in the past. So yeah, it was just easy.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of like building that team out and having people to call. Like it's very
Yeah.
helpful.
And this kind of lines up with almost like the second last question I had. You know, when I talked about doing this interview, I mentioned some of the people I worked with, and you said you were producing at the time, you were doing some help with the MrBeast stuff. And I guess this is kind of a two-part question. You know, I would love to hear about that. And also, what projects are you working on now? I'd love to hear, you know, you have all these amazing things that I'm seeing. I want to hear what's going on, you know, in the creative world for you.
Yeah, last year I was in Japan for 2 months. I came back, got a call from Beast, was like, hey, produce my Japan segment. It was very strange actually how I got hired on that. It's a wild experience. It's a whole story. Working for Beast is a whole hour-long conversation. But yeah, it was like the weirdest, craziest, best / worst month ever. Yeah, but it was great. I got to go to Japan. I got to help him make his Japan segment for his like vacation video, and I think it was successful. And yeah, I had fun. So yeah, I think overall that's all I want to say.
Yeah, no, and like projects, like what sort of creative projects?
Projects I'm working on right now. I just finished a short film with Brenna D'Amico from Descendants.
Okay.
I said her name wrong. Her last name probably. I'm sorry, Brenna. But yeah, she was fantastic. She was starring in this short film we just did called Adjoining, and it's with Popternative and my company Vesperia. Me and Dakota Dalby directed together, so we got to co-direct for the first time. We've made so many projects together, but to finally like co-direct was pretty cool. It was a great experience. And then we have a feature film in development. I mean, we have the script, so it's kind of past development, but it's not yet in pre-production. So it's just in this, they're in the financing phase right now, and that's with a company called Kin Productions out in London. Michael Hurst is the executive producer on it. He is the show creator of Vikings. So that's happening right now based off of one of our short films. I have another short film, Cafe Racer. It's a half Japanese, half English action film that I'm in love with and super passionate about. And it's being read. The feature version of that short is being read at a very big company right now. I can't say the company.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. But kind of like a dream company. If they go with it, that'd be cool. If not, it is what it is.
Yeah.
This industry is impossible sometimes. But I feel like it's so good for them and like it's what they need. So the fact that we have got a meeting with them and they're reading it is very cool. And then what else? I have a meeting next week to figure out some contracts on a movie that might bring me back to Eastern Canada, actually, in Quebec.
No way.
Very heartfelt, true story drama from a friend from middle school that brought me the story. It's his life story.
Wow.
So, it's pretty impactful, and it's something really important as well. And we wrote a short film for it. We had some funding, and then this company got a hold of it, and they're like, let's just make it a feature. We'll fund the feature. So we're talking to them about doing that in Quebec later this year, which is like crazy fast turnaround for this feature script because we haven't written it yet. So that would be exciting, and I'll know more about that very soon. So that's a very exciting project for me. And I wrote a comedy during COVID
Ooh.
called Goat Town, and it's about my hometown, Qualicum Beach. And we've done like 20 drafts of this thing. Dakota and I co-wrote it. But it's like basically based on my life and my hometown, and it's freaking hilarious. And it's gonna be our super bad because like I feel like it's something that is gonna get made when we have aged out to play the roles that we wrote for ourselves. But yeah, it's like a high school
Yeah.
comedy. It's a fresh take on that like genre,
Yeah.
high school comedy. So yeah, I love that script so much.
Oh.
And we just sent it to, when I say we, I'm like my
Yeah.
manager. And so we just sent it to a company that makes these kind of movies that I would love to work with. So we'll see what happens there. We're in this like waiting game
Yeah.
period right now for a lot of projects, but I'm also talking about doing some kids projects actually. So Sydney Scotia, who plays Geneva on Some Assembly, her and I are like best friends. We've been best friends since the show, so we are always hanging out and talking about stuff. And we've created some projects together in the past, and we have a couple kids shows that we're kind of like actively pitching and developing. So
Mm.
just literally sent those two out. They're being read at a company this last week as well. Art meets business meets like you're trying to like when you're making these like films on a bigger scale, you're trying to balance like artistic mind, creative mind with like corporate. So
Yeah.
there's balance and there's a way things need to be done. And yeah, there's a lot of I mean, I spent a long time the last like 8 years just like learning business of film and like doing that with my co-writer, co-producer. And yeah, we've been trying to figure that out for a long time and just now are figuring it out. And it's like
Yeah.
it's been years. It's like there's not one way to do it. There's a million ways to make a movie. You can literally just get a camera and go make a movie, and that has worked for some people. And yeah, I think that's kind of like the beauty of filmmaking and like music as well. It's like there isn't one way to do it, and it's whatever works for you. And it's like that's how I started. Like I just literally started. So
Yeah.
um there's no reason to wait sometimes.
Well, I don't want to take any more of your time, but last question I always ask my guests, what would you want to pass on to, the listeners listening? We've got a lot of young people, a lot of older people. Like, what advice would you give, perhaps even you'd give to your younger self that you might think would be helpful today?
It's kind of the advice that I've always followed and give out sometimes, which I think is good because it's not just film related or entertainment related. So this can be anything in life. I think you just gotta do what you like, do what you love. Go do what you love, do what's fun, and focus on that. And then you can help other people enjoy their lives as well and just have a good time.